2014 was a rather big year for gaming. The Xbox One and PS4 were hitting their strides with games like Shadow of Mordor, Destiny, and Dark Souls 2, but the year was not only defined by releases. Lots of fantastic upcoming games were announced that generated tons of interest, and while most of those games would go on to eventually release between then and now, some, like Dead Island 2, would just sort of fall off a cliff, never to be talked about again. But what happened? Why would a highly anticipated sequel to a relatively popular game that helped define the decade in which it was released go so many years without so much as a demo or beta? What the hell happened to Dead Island 2? E3 is known to have some memorable moments when publishers and developers show off upcoming projects. But easily one of the most memorable from 2014's E3 was the reveal of Dead Island 2. Even today, the official trailer still garners a fair amount of traffic from interested viewers. The trailer takes you through a metamorphosis from normal human status to an undead nightmare by showing you the world going to hell in a handbasket behind a cocky jogger before swallowing him up as well, and it was a hit for the audience, who not only enjoyed how well it was put together, but also who were ecstatic to see that a sequel to Dead Island was coming. Dead Island didn't exactly set the world on fire with its story, setting, or any sort of abundance of original ideas at all, but those who did take the time to play it and its multiple expansions and updates would tend to feel quite favorably with its brand of Fallout-style RPG gameplay and its ability to keep the player on their toes, despite there not really being much of a consequence for dying. While very few of the concepts that made up the original Dead Island were even remotely revolutionary, and that did earn the game lots of lukewarm reviews at the time, the thoughtful way those elements were mixed in with the game's pitch-perfect sense of urgency is what kept players coming back and asking for more. Dead Island, despite some less than glowing reviews, would go on to sell quite well. The emphasis on melee attacks to dispatch zombies was something that first-person action games had rarely seen, and if that combination of visceral, bloody action and RPG-style leveling up of your character's skill set appealed to you, odds are that you saw the entire thing through to the end. Seemingly right on schedule, rumors about the sequel started to swirl and ultimately came to a head with the infamous E3 announcement trailer. Since then, however, it has not been a smooth ride for the game. After some time in development, the team at Jaeger was removed from the project by Deep Silver, which couldn't have been anything less than a massive setback for the game, as it had been in development for a couple of years. This was probably the largest single contributor to the darkness and silence in which we now find the game completely shrouded. Sumo Digital had apparently been enlisted to take over the reins of the game for a time, but seeing as how several other titles like Team Sonic Racing and Crackdown 3 have been released from Sumo during these years, it's safe to say that Sumo was either uninterested in giving Dead Island 2 top priority, or perhaps weren't quite up to the task. Eventually, Sumo would also be joined by or pushed out in favor of another studio around the time Deep Silver was acquired by THQ Nordic, who seems to have placed the game's primary responsibilities in the hands of Dambuster Studios, the same folks that made Homefront: The Revolution. It's unclear as to whether or not Sumo still has a hand in the game, but Dambuster does appear to be largely in control of the helm at the moment. Regardless of whether you're comforted or off-put by that team having control over the project, surely this much turbulence isn't a good sign. And keep in mind, these are just the instances of the IP switching hands that we know about. Plenty of games do make it out of tumultuous development cycles without necessarily being dumpster fires, but it's also true that many others do not. The more time that passes and the more times that a game gets handed off to entirely different teams of people, the more danger the integrity of the game's original vision is in, and that's not a good thing for anybody. Despite the deep hole of secrecy Dead Island 2 has been swallowed up by, we have gotten some crumbs of news and details about the gameplay and setting over the years. For one, the game is supposedly going to be set in major cities all around the west coast of the US, unlike the tropical island setting of the original. This might make one wonder how the island part of the title will make much sense, but I digress. On top of a new setting, some new mechanics are also apparently part of the package, and this is said to include a greatly improved crafting system that will dwarf the originals and a deliberately expanded emphasis on co-op, which at one time allowed up to 8 players to meet up and bash and slice their way through zombies together. Whether or not these features are still at the center of the experience is unknown today. All we can know for sure is that they were at one time. So with all of that in mind, it seems fairly obvious that trying to figure out the exact state of Dead Island 2 is basically impossible right now. Whether that's because it's being purposefully held back for some sort of massive re-reveal, or hidden away because it's still wallowing in the depths of development hell somewhere, is anyone's guess. Odds are it's probably something in between. Surely with all of the years, manpower, and resources that have been dumped into the game, there must be something substantial here. And with the amount of investment that's already been dispersed on the game's behalf, it would make almost no sense to cancel the game at this point, assuming it's not a total mess. More likely is that the IP is still becoming what it needs to be, slowly but surely morphing into an actual game with a coherent vision and some sort of resemblance of its original tone that can recoup its development costs. The problem is, with a game that has moved across so many developers and even different publishers, it's very difficult to determine what the cost of development even is anymore, with all of the different parties having their own versions of what they consider to be profit to deal with. All in all, the good news is that Dead Island 2 will probably end up getting finished and released at some point. If it can go through the trials and tribulations it already has without getting canceled, odds are those who could decide to cancel it have decided not to for a good reason. They probably see that there is something here worth finishing, and hopefully we'll get to see it too someday. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to ensure you'll be notified when new videos go up.